Hi, and welcome back to the SPSS Statistics Tips and Tricks series. In part 5 we're going to be looking at the Style button. And the Style button is a little button that you'll find in a number of the procedures under the Analyze menu. It allows us to automatically highlight parts of the output that are of interest to us and control their display format. Let's have a look at how it works. So we can look at a couple of examples of where we can apply the Style button. The first example we're going to look at is where we use the Style button to highlight the most statistically significant relationships in a series of output or tests that we're running. And to do so, we'll just go to Analyze Descriptive Statistics and call up crosstabs and do some associated chi-square tests. So let's call up the crosstabs dialog. I'm just going to choose one of these fields at the bottom here. I'm going to look at the length of time that people have currently been employed in their job, broken down by their gender, the job category, their ethnic minority status, education level, their current salary banded, the previous experience grouped, and their age grouped. And I'm also going to ask it to run the chi-square test with each of these tables. So we hit continue and click OK. You can see that, as you would expect, you've got a series of tables that are coming out here, and you've got a bunch of different chi-square tests, some of which are going to be statistically significant, some of which are not. It's often difficult for people who are not necessarily used to looking at this type of output to really spot where the significant values are. So highlighting it or using the Style button may be a useful way to draw your eye towards the most pertinent information. So if I just delete this output to make it clear, I'll go back into that crosstabs dialog box using the recall dialog box button there. And if I go to Style, you'll notice that we suddenly got this little sub dialog where we can start to point it to specific bits of output in the viewer window. So here, if I go to table, I can say, well, what do you want this to apply to? And I say, well, I only want it to apply to chi-square tests. What things do you want to apply to which parts of these tests? Well, if I can look at, well, I've got options here. I've got all data cells. I can choose significance. I can choose the condition. So I can say if the significance value is less than or equal to 0.05, or just perhaps even less than 0.05, and hit continue. And I can choose a color with which to highlight it. So I could say, yeah, I want it highlighted in, let's say, this pale yellow color here, and hit continue and OK. If we run that again, what we see is that scrolling down through the output, that only where it's seeing values in the significance column here, which are less than 0.05, hasn't highlighted them. So here we have one for linear bilinear association, and here we have one at the end here for asymptotic significance, two-sided. These are the Pearson chi-square and the likelihood ratio. So your eye is immediately drawn to the very low probability values. Where else might we use this type of procedure? Well, anywhere where you're getting hit with a lot of information very quickly is where it's quite useful. So if I go to Analyze here as another example and look at the correlate procedure, here's the bivariate correlate procedure. I'm going to call up a bunch of continuous fields here. So we've got a bunch of scale fields. Send them across. We've got age, got previous experience again. Send that across. And we'll just run the standard Pearson correlation coefficient here and click OK. As you can see, it produces quite a lot of output quite quickly. We get some output is referring to the number of cases, some of it's referring to the significance of that correlation, some is referring to the correlation itself, and we also get a series of ones down the diagonal, which is simply not very useful to us because it's simply showing the correlation of that variable against itself. Is there a way we could highlight within tables like this which are the most important correlations to look at without having to wade through them? Well, certainly yes. But if we use the Style button again, if I go back to bivariate correlations, we go to Style. I guess one of the first things we can do is we can look at all applicable tables. We can say, well, correlations is what we're interested in. The value we're interested in is the actual correlation itself. Let's say for the condition, we're interested in those greater than or equal to values of let's say 0.66 for interest. Continue, and we'll have it highlighted in a color like orange. We can use a different color for the text, of course, and make that red, make it bold if we like. Hit continue. We can add another condition here. We can say also for correlation tables. Let's try and deal with those numbers where the correlation is basically the field is correlating against itself. We get these values of 1 to kind of get in the way. So we can say, okay, let's go to the condition here and we'll say, well, if it's exactly equal to a particular value, so if it's exactly 1, don't do anything about that, and we'll say, okay, well, for that value there, we don't want any background color, and we want, let's say, the font to be in a pale gray, because we don't want to draw our attention to it too much, and so on and so on. So we could add another one here. We can say, okay, let's go for a slightly different color for another type of correlation value, and say, well, let's say if it's, less than 0.66 or something like that, and greater than a certain point. So let's say between inclusive, higher inclusive, lower inclusive. So we can say lower inclusive here if it's between 0.66 and let's say 0.33. Click continue at that point and give that a color as well. Let's go for the pale yellow this time. Hit continue and OK, and it goes and highlights that, and suddenly we've got this table where it's highlighting the strongest correlations. So the medium level correlations are being highlighted here as well, and the values equal to 1 are just grayed out here in the background.